Welcome to this four-part series on classroom management, quick tips and strategies. Our learning target includes educators will be able to identify and understand the what, why, and how of Tier 1 behavior management, the antecedent, during, and after Tier 1 behaviors. Educators will be able to identify and understand the what, why, and how of CHAMP's classroom management approach. For example, this will be an introduction. Also, we will have a chance to practice sharing CHAMP's expectations. And lastly, we will be able to write a script and share how do we share good news and growth opportunity phone calls with our scholars and their families. To begin, we start with the do now activator. Agree or disagree? Read the quote and decide if you agree that we typically teach behavior or do we typically punish behavior? Explain why or why not. If a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, do we teach or do we punish? This famous quote is by John Herner. Go ahead and take a few minutes to just jot down your thoughts about whether you agree or disagree with this. Is there an expectation for scholars to just know how to behave? Or is it our responsibility to teach? Pause this video if you need more time. We will use this do not activator to transition into our positive behavior intervention supports. Tier 1 PBIS. We're going to go ahead and discuss really some important common thought processes that we need to be able to know and to understand in order to be able to support our scholars better. Common knowledge and common understanding. True or false? Scholars must know what is expected of them. Behavior is learned. Schools must provide safe learning, conducive, and predictable environments. So our scholars need safe environments, they need learning conducive environments, and they need predictable environments. And then lastly, we must teach scholars what positive behavior looks like. Is this true or false? Look at the following four statements and go ahead and journal to yourself. Are these things that we are open to teaching scholars every day, or do we expect them to just come to us already ready to learn and prepared? When we look at the following statements, when it comes to pedagogy, or really even for adults, andragogy, which is adult learning theory, really children and adults need to really know what's expected of them. We all have a stronger sense of confidence and we're encouraged when we know the expectations for ourselves. Behavior is learned. Each of us, whether adults or a child, we look at the environment, we look at our community, we look at what behavior is considered acceptable in this environment and what behavior is not. And we are expected to provide safe and learning safe environments that are learning conducive and predictable, meaning there's routines. Scholars need routines. It provides a sense of safety and a sense of, again, understanding what to expect. It lowers that sense of anxiety for scholars. And we must teach scholars what positive behavior looks like. Again, what does that look, feel, and sound like? To assume that they come to us already prepared and understanding what that looks like is really a misconception. The science of behavior has taught us over the past, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, the science of behavior, behavioral science has taught us that students are not born with bad behaviors. So we go back to that nurture versus nature, right? So behavior is something that's taught, right? It can be taught, right? So scholars are not born bad with bad behaviors. Behavior is something that is taught. And so students do not learn, whether it's directly or indirectly, right? Students do not learn better ways of behaving when only given aversive consequences. To learn better ways of behaving, students must be directly taught the expected behavior. So we have to be intentional. Also, to retain new behaviors, now that we've taught the behaviors, how do scholars retain it? This tells us students must be given specific, positive feedback and opportunities to practice in a variety of settings where the behavior should be used. So again, constant practice, guidance, not just behaving that way in this teacher's classroom and then they go to another teacher's classroom and then they've forgotten the expectations of the behavior. So they need multiple opportunities to allow them to demonstrate that behavior. Hence the reason and the powerful reason why we have the PBIS system in our school: positive behavior interventions, positive behavior supports, positive behavior reinforcers and encouragement. Because school-wide, we want our scholars, we want to build that macro culture of positive behavior. And then we, in our classrooms, there's a micro culture. We want to make sure that's positive as well. We want to make sure everyone's owning the piece that we need to give scholars specific feedback and opportunities to practice these behaviors. So with that being said, we'll move to the ABCs of behavior management. The ABCs include the following: the antecedent. Think of an incident, right? But before the incident occurs is considered the antecedent, right? Then we have the behavior. That's what we see, and then we have the consequence. So we have the before, the during, and the after. Anytime there's a behavior that occurs, we always want to identify, well, what happened before, and then what happened during, and then what should happen afterwards. And so here we go. The ABCs. So the first thing is the antecedent. So the A, it equals the event that happens immediately before that triggered that behavior. So events that, that happen before the behavior happens. So when the teachers anticipate students will struggle with demonstrating a skill, that's already been taught, then they give a reminder to students about that skill. So for example, the antecedent could include, okay, we're about to transition to go outside for recess or to go to our physical education course for PE. And so if there's a scholar who really doesn't like that class, right? Sometimes we know that we can really help to shape and to lower the anxiety of that scholar that may not like going outside, and we can kind of anticipate that. So when we think about what happens before, during, and after, right? So if we want to set that scholar up for success, we also want to start planning for the before, the during, and the after. But again, the things that we can do beforehand are setting up expectations, right? For example, when we travel in the hallways, what are the expectations, right? What are the routines? As teachers, we can use prompts, pre-corrections to remind scholars, okay, we're about to walk in the hallway. Make sure you use your quiet voices, bodies to yourself, and walking on the right side of the hall so we allow other people to pass by. The teacher, we might greet them, or while actively supervising them in the hallway, we might smile, provide those positive reinforcements that you guys are on the right track. We might even directly say, before we begin, right? We're going to stand up. We're going to place our backpacks over here, before we leave. When we're in the hallway, we're going to use these voices, et cetera, et cetera. So just always setting the scholars up before set them up with the expectations before the behavior actually occurs. And then when that positive behavior occurs, meaning they comply with what we're asking, then we can provide those reinforcers. So that's the A, the antecedent. Then we have B, the behavior. That's an observable act, what the scholar does or does not do. Again, we say behaviors as if behaviors are the negative ones. No, we want to definitely focus on the positive behaviors because that is what we want to continue to build. So these are the expected behaviors that we want students to maintain. We want the students to use, that positive outlook over the misbehavior. So, for example, if we are giving more time and attention to misbehaviors, then essentially we're really saying that that's what matters to us most as opposed to the positive behavior. So we want to make sure that we are catching the expected behavior. We want to make sure we acknowledge that as opposed to spending more time towards the misbehaviors. And that might include a scholar who is in their seat when the bell rings. They're prepared with their materials. They're quiet. They enter the room quietly. We want to make sure we're acknowledging that we see, what they're doing, and affirming what they're doing. That's the desired behavior. Then we have the C, consequence. So C equals the resulting event or outcome that occurs immediately following the behavior. So what happens after the fact? Are we rewarding scholars with those dollars, those school-wide PBIS dollars? Are we high-fiving them? Are we smiling at them? Are we giving them a nonverbal gesture to just positively affirm them? Are we verbally saying, hey, thank you, Sam, for being ready by listening for my signal and coming to the carpet area right away? Thank you, Melissa, for being ready to by coming to the carpet, and are we even positively phrasing the non-examples, right? Scholars who have yet to comply, like Jill, when I call you to be ready and join the group, I need you to put away what you're working on and join us as quickly as possible, right? So all of these things were positively phrased, telling the scholar, hey, when I call you, to be ready to join the group. This is what we need to see happen, as opposed to saying you're not doing this. No, this is just what we need to see happen. That way the scholar can hone in on what they need to be doing and not feeling like the teacher just called them out. Now we have our tiered system. So we have our, as a part of the MTSS process, we have tier one, tier two, and tier three, right? When it comes to behavior. So tier one, when it comes to behavior, is a school-wide approach. This is a customer service everyone gets. So school-wide interventions, right? For all learners to prevent behavior challenges. So again, we all as an educator has a responsibility of making sure that we are creating that microculture in our classroom, and then there's a school-wide system of support, right? And so we have behavioral expectations. There are expectations school-wide. How do you walk in the hallway? How do you enter the cafeteria? How do you enter and exit a school-wide assembly? Things like that. How do we prepare for dismissal at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day? Or we prepare to receive school to start our morning out? What are those protocols? So these are school-wide interventions and behaviors, right? That are expectations. So at the tier one level, what's expected school-wide? What's expected in your classroom? Have you outlined that? Then we have acknowledgement systems. So how do we praise our scholars when they are demonstrating the behavior we expect to see? Social skills instruction, and then active supervision and engagement. So making sure that we're actually monitoring our tier one process. As a classroom educator, you are directly involved in the tier one process because your classroom, there are certain things that we take care of at the tier one level in our classrooms. And so at the tier one level, we have our prevention supports and strategies. So one thing at the tier one level is positive behavioral expectations explicitly defined, taught, reinforced, monitored, and corrected. It is the classroom teacher's responsibility to make sure you teach, that you define what respect is, you define what your expectations are, and even including the scholars in the process. Include your scholars in the process. Maybe there's an expectation or a rule that you have that really is not serving the scholars well. So explicitly defining what the expectations are, teaching them, reinforcing them, monitoring them, and correcting them. Also, the classroom teacher is responsible for community building. So maybe having these circles when, if a scholar needs to talk or there's a conflict, we all come together. We have this community circles where we learn more about each other. We can speak freely. We can support each other and build each other up. We have restorative language. So again, every building educator is responsible for restorative language. So really, if somebody focuses on what you're not doing, not doing, not doing, not doing, they're not really telling you what you are doing right. They're not really affirming you. So effective statements are important and restorative questions are important when a scholar is ready to transition. If they have a bad day or a bad moment, we should be prepared to restore them back to a sense of, you know what, I get this morning was a rough morning, but that's okay. This afternoon is going to be great. Is there anything that you need for me to support you in this process? Is there anything, any strategy you want to use so that when you do feel overwhelmed, that you can, is there a procedure or protocol we need to put in place to support the scholar if they ever need to go to the restroom and splash some water on their face and then come back? We have check-ins, and there's the 4 to 1 positives to 1 correction ratio, which is really important at the tier 1 level. All classroom educators are responsible for this. For every corrective thing you tell a scholar, you need to affirm them 4 times before the next corrective statement comes. Very important to continue to build a relationship with your scholar. Social emotional learning, and then we have foster and promote healthy, affirming relationships. So, again, making sure our scholars have that confidence that you like them, you care for them, you are invested in them, not just for their academic success, but also for their humanity and who they are. The next is the 4 to 1 positive feedback ratio. Just wanting to remind you that again, this is research based. That 4 responses are desired. Positive responses are desired before you correct a scholar or provide some kind of comment about any misbehavior. And really, Harvard research has found that employees on the job really in today's time needs about 6 positive affirmations to every one corrective feedback that they receive. And so again, as a community, we're needing more and more affirmations to really, you know that we are on the right track, we're meeting the expectations, and that, this makes this environment one that I understand because it's a common language and a common understanding. Next, we have some feedback examples. So we have some resources, but these are just some feedback examples if a teacher wanted to provide feedback to a scholar directly or to call home. What's the feedback for scholar attitude? The scholar is an enthusiastic learner who seems to enjoy school. So this is something positive you might say about a scholar, right? Earl or Ebony exhibits a positive outlook and attitude in classroom. It's appreciated. Um, or Ebony should be proud of herself because she uses instincts to deal with matters independently and in a positive way. Or Earl should be proud of himself because he is courteous and shows good manners in classroom. He follows directions and he conducts himself with maturity. And so these are all positive comments. So notice 0 negated words are on this page. We always want to find these comments that really support and really point the scholar and the parent in the direction that we want them to go. And most importantly, we want to Q-tip. We want to remember to quit taking it personal. There may be times where scholars are just not having a good day. They're upset with you. Maybe you are the trigger. You're triggering them. And so you want to avoid power struggles. One way that you do that is you quit taking it personal. When a scholar is in their emotional brain, they are not their most healthy self. They are temporarily not themselves. They are chemically imbalanced in the moment. They are operating out of emotion. And emotion is this roller coaster that can really, take them in places and pockets that they don't want to necessarily, or that they don't live in, but they just kind of vacation there in this moment. And so to avoid the power struggle, you always want to remember your role is to de-escalate. And de-escalating, that means that you start with verbal de-escalation first, meaning your words have the power to throw fuel on the fire, or it has the power of throwing a huge hose of water on it, right? Where you're just drenching that fire down with water. And so are your words water or are your words fuel? And so to de-escalate, we definitely support and connect our organization with the Crisis Prevention Institute, CPI. We have those nonverbal crisis interventions, and a part of those are our 10 de-escalation tips, which definitely remind us to be empathetic and non-judgmental. Again, we have to watch those things. We want to listen with our empathetic ears, listen for the emotion behind what's being said, not literally what's being said, so that it doesn't cause offense. Then respect personal space. So again, ask for consent before you put your hand on the scholar's shoulder, because that could be a trigger in and of itself. Use non-threatening nonverbals. So open your arms up. Refrain from closing your arm, crossing your arms, or having your hip on the right side or the left side of your body extended. That can bring off the energy that you're upset or have a negative attitude. You want to keep your emotional brain in check. Focus on that person's feelings, not just what they're saying, but from what feeling are they speaking from. You want to ignore challenging questions. So questions that require them to think really deep are definitely a non-example during this moment. If a scholar is super upset, you want to make sure that you just provide them some yes or no options. Would you like to talk about this now or later? Would you like to go and cool off by going to get a sip of water? Or would you like to sit here and calm down, the best way that you can? And so giving them either or questions really supports. You want to set limits, but then you want to choose wisely what you insist upon. You want to allow time for silence or reflection, and you want to allow time for decisions. They need to determine what they want to do. And so at this point, I want to have you reflect. Please provide 2 stars on a post-it note or a journal taking guide. Write 2 stellar things that you learned during this session. 1 wish. So on a post-it note, you can write 1 wishful idea that would improve the training experience. And the third is write 1 comment that you will make to stamp your learning. What resource and supports would you need? Go ahead and take a few minutes to complete this reflection. And this concludes our first part, where we identify and understand the what, why, and how of Tier 1 behavior management. What things do we need to know about the antecedent, the during, and the after the Tier 1 behavior? What is our role as an educator? And so mission is accomplished in this area, and now we will transition into our next segment.